I ask that we set aside the unanimous consent, that we set aside the pending amendment and call up amendment number 43.
Madam
Is
President.
there objection?
I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President, I would like to talk about this amendment. I hope there's still a way that I might be able to offer it. If I'm not able to offer it as an amendment to this bill, I intend to offer it as a bill to become part of the ongoing laws that govern these kinds of activities. I'd also say that I have said to many people my great expectations, which I have for the chairman of our committee, Chairman Mikulski. I understand that she's trying to work out how to make the work of the Senate happen, and I think she's going to be vigilant and determined in leading us back toward the normal appropriations process. I am proud to be a member of her committee, and I really do believe that she and Senator Shelby, the ranking Republican, are going to be insisting that the Senate get back to the way it does business, and I look forward to working with her to solve the problems we're solving this week and the problems that we need to solve before October the 1st when the new fiscal year begins. So let me say about this moment we find ourselves in that there is no question that government spending is out of control. We've increased spending 19% since 2008. The federal debt has skyrocketed to almost $17 trillion now. In 1981, when Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president, as part of his inaugural address, we were approaching the first trillion in debt in the history of the country. And the illustration he gave in that speech was if you had a stack of $1,000 bills 4 inches high, you'd be a millionaire. But to have $1 trillion, you'd have to stack those dollar bills 67 miles high. Well, now we're 67 miles high of $1,000 bills, not of dollar bills. And every 4 inches of that was $1 million. We're 67 miles high times almost 17, and that's unacceptable. The president's own budget office has made more than 200 recommendations of ways we could find savings through making government more important. The Government Accounting Office has identified 51 areas where programs are inefficient, ineffective, and overlapping, leading to billions of dollars in wasted taxpayer money. There's simply no reason that the government should stop providing essential services, which is what I want to talk about, because we're cutting 2.5% of the budget through these line-by-line cuts that, by the way, wouldn't happen if we'd budget at or below the number the law now says is the maximum dollar we can spend in any year, this year or for the next 9 years. This doesn't have to happen at all, but if it does happen, there's no reason that we should have to be curtailing essential services. The Budget Control Act didn't fail to adequately plan for how you protect these essential services that on other days when the government is not functioning at a full level, there have been many ways found to see that those employees got to work. In fact, according to several letters from the Office of Management and Budget, federal agencies have actually been instructed not to plan for sequestration. A few days ago, I was on the floor with a letter from the Office of Management and Budget on September the 28th last year, 2 days before the new spending year starts, and the letter says, spend your money like the law will not be obeyed. Spend your money like the sequestration law will never go into effect. Spend your money like the Budget Control Act will be changed. And of course, we come now halfway into the fiscal year, and everybody's been spending like the law isn't the law, and suddenly we have these problems that are much bigger than they would have been if we'd have dealt with them over 12 months, and we're trying to deal with them over a handful of months. The furlough notices are being made in a sweeping fashion. They're threatening day-to-day services that protect life and safety. Now, every service the federal government provides doesn't affect life and safety. I'm not saying that every federal job is subject to this amendment or every federal job is critical for everything that happens every day. I recently sent the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, a letter urging him to use his authority to minimize the impact of sequestration as it relates to food safety and inspection services, so-called FSIS, Food Safety and Inspection Services. The letter came out right after USDA said that they'd be laying people off for as many as 15 days in the last 4 months or so of the spending year, the 4 months that would end at the end of September. It's estimated that these food inspector furloughs would lead to the closure of nearly 6,300 facilities across America for the day that the food inspector doesn't show up. You know, if you happen to work somewhere where the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, supervises, they have to show up whenever they want to, and they can do that periodically. They can do that as a surprise visit. They can do lots of things. But in the facilities that are supervised by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that inspector has to be there every day and every minute of every day for those workers in Missouri or Wisconsin or Maryland or anywhere else to work. And I've been to a lot of these facilities because we have 146 of them in our state of meat and poultry and eggs. These are hard jobs. These people are not showing up to work every day just because they'd like to have somewhere to go. And the idea that hundreds of workers, in fact, thousands of workers couldn't work in a given day because the USDA inspector doesn't show up and don't get paid for that day, and their families suffer for that day because we couldn't figure out how to prioritize what was necessary for those people to go to work, is unacceptable for me. As a result of these furloughs, the estimate is that nearly 500,000 workers would lose $400 million in wages over the course of this month. You know, when that one inspector doesn't show up, or the two inspectors don't show up at that plant that day, no matter how many people work there, and there may be 1,000 people working at that plant that day, none of them can work. None of them get paid. None of them produce the food that a few months later will, or a few weeks later, or a few days later won't show up on the grocery store shelves in the country, and that's a problem too. But the problem I'm concerned about is the working families that are affected here, as well as the working families who later will see their meat, poultry, and egg prices go up because the supply is that much less than it otherwise would have been. In his response to my letter, Secretary Vilsack claimed that, quote, when Congress drafted the Budget Control Act of 2011, directing federal agencies to reduce their spending at specified levels, it included no exemption for essential employees such as FSIS inspectors, end quote. So today, I'd like to introduce the amendment that the chairman's objected to, and I will introduce in the next few days a piece of legislation exactly like the amendment and continue to look for ways to add this amendment to this legislation. But what this amendment would do was give the administration the flexibility that it claims it doesn't have. In doing so, this amendment will ensure essential federal employees continue to provide vital services such as meat inspectors, control tower operators, border security guards, and here's how we do it. In April of 2011, the Office of Personnel Management sent a detailed memo. This is President Obama's Office of Personnel Management, a detailed memo to each federal agency outlining which federal employees would be exempted from furlough during a potential government shutdown. Now, my belief is that the administration may still have this ability, but if they don't have, I want to give it to them, and I want to give it to them exactly like they themselves said it should be applied in April of 2011. Those employees are considered essential, quote, to ensure the safety of life and protection of property, end quote, based on language contained in this act. My amendment would apply identical language used during government shutdown scenarios to the sequester. It defines essential employees as an employee that performs work involving the safety of human life or protection of property as determined by the head of the agency. This is the same language not only used in April of 2011, but used in guidance from the Clinton administration in preparation for the 1995 government shutdown, the last time when the government really did shut down. These people, Madam President, showed up. These people were told to report to work. And if it's good enough for President Clinton to tell them to report to work, and if it's good enough for President Obama in April of 11 to tell them to report to work, it should be good enough now for the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Transportation and the Secretary of Homeland Security and anyone else where these people are being furloughed to do so. This provision provides agencies with funding flexibility so that essential services are maintained while non-essential employees are furloughed. I think we could do this, and with the chairman's help, we will do this in the committee. I would hope without having furloughs necessary in the future, but this amendment would solve the problem of essential employees that both President Clinton and President Obama thought was important to deal with the last two times a similar topic came up. And I'd like to also mention a second amendment, which I'm not offering, so it doesn't need to be objected to. Senator Pryor and I have an amendment that may approach this, at least from the Agriculture, Rural Development, and Food and Drug Administration in a different way. He's the chairman and I'm the ranking member of that subcommittee in appropriations. I hope we can find a solution here, and I would notice that there's not a quorum present, Madam President.